This is Michael Cowen, and welcome to Trial Lawyer Nation.
He helps us pan for the gold inside ourselves.
You need to have grit. I mean, a lot of this is grit.
I feel like I've been made a better lawyer.
They're talking about something that's real to them.
You have to be really careful not to be Goliath.
They saved a bunch of lives and changed society forever.
But let's just begin the conversation.
Welcome to Trial Lawyer Nation, your source for guidance to win bigger verdicts, get more cases, and manage your practice. And now, here's your host, noteworthy author, sought-after speaker, and renowned trial lawyer, Michael Cowen.
Welcome back to Trial Lawyer Nation. On today's podcast, I have Tim McKey from Vista Consulting. Tim's the owner of Vista. It's a consulting firm that helps plaintiffs' firms run their business as a business that actually works. I asked Tim to come on my show because he's helped my firm a lot. What I found is when the business works right and I don't have to worry about the little things happening, then I can really be creative and focus on doing my cases at a high level. When I'm constantly getting interrupted to make sure did something get filed, did the bills get paid, employee issues, I can't get creative work done on cases. And so Tim is going to talk to us about how to make a law firm run better. He's helped me a lot, and I hope he's useful to you too.
Today on Trial Lawyer Nation, we have Tim McKey from Vista Consulting. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Michael, and you?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for asking. So tell me a little bit about, who are you and, why should lawyers listen to you today? What do you have of interest to us?
Good question. My name is Tim McKey, and I am the owner of Vista Consulting. And Vista is a plaintiff law firm, consulting firm. We've been in business since around 2008, and I have been doing consulting work since around 2000 with general business, but really narrowed the focus to plaintiff firms around 2008, 2009, at that time with a lawyer partner named Chad Dudley. Chad is still a very good friend, but not an actual owner of Vista today. But we work together to work on his firm in operational matters. And again, just define what operational matters are. It's really kind of everything that the law firm does that's not the practice of law. In other words, how cases get in the door and how they matriculate their way through the firm to ultimate resolution, hopefully, or to non-resolution, and that be the right call also. So I've been doing this since 2008. I am a CPA by training, so I come at things generally from numbers and metrics, but at the same time realizing that there's a lot more that goes into successful businesses, such as the culture of the law firm and human resource issues and those type of things. Again, we look at a firm from a holistic standpoint. And I know that's probably a big mouthful, but hopefully that gives you and the listeners a little bit of basis from where we come from.
Thanks. And, of course, I am, full disclosure, I am a client of Vista and happy to be one. And you guys have helped my firm a whole bunch and, frankly, let me sleep better at night because things run better. And I appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about how did you get involved in working with plaintiffs' firms? I mean, that's not something most CPAs jump into doing.
No, absolutely not. And and I know, Michael, you and I have talked about a lot of things, obviously offline, but you may or may not know that, I owned a traditional CPA firm for many years and kind of got to a point in my career where I made a strategic decision that I wanted to start helping affect the score of businesses instead of just keep the score. And that wasn't a very easy decision to make. In fact, I struggled with it a lot. I call it my breakdown period. My partner in the CPA firm at the time said I should refer to it as an epiphany. But it was we started kind of shifting our practice from traditional accounting work into, again, helping firms define what success was. And one of the first businesses that really accepted our proposal for us to get behind their green curtain a little bit and understand how their business operated happened to be a plaintiff personal injury firm. The other firm, as kind of an aside, there were really two of our first clients. One was the personal injury law firm, and the other was an automobile repair shop. And after breaking it down and looking at different systems and processes, you're going to laugh at this, but the systems and processes were quite honestly not that much different. Obviously, we were looking at getting to a result, and if you think about it, lawsuits start generally with a call to a lawyer, and getting your car repair starts with a phone call to the automobile repair shop. And both of those calls needed to result in some specific actions from the potential customer. And so we just kind of marched those processes forward and tried to discover, why do people come in to the firm? How can we influence their decision that they've made the right decision to pick up the phone and call, and then evaluate that it's a case the firm can handle and do a good job on, and then how does the case go through case management to resolution. So I don't know that we coined the term, nationwide, but we started looking at what we called operational metrics. Again, being a numbers guy, we said, okay, and again, I'll talk about in terms of the law firm, but I want you to keep in mind that some of this worked for the automobile repair shop also, was how many calls did you get? How many of those calls were calls that you would actually think you could, that you wanted, if you will, that you thought that you could provide a high-quality service? And then how many of those did you actually convert to customers? And, and I don't want to get too deep in your particular firm, Michael, but your firm, all firms are different, but some firms are more, attempting to attract the customer with some type of either advertising or some type of acquisition mode, word of mouth, even if it's simply word of mouth or reputation, and some of it is referral. So, depending on the type firm, and we want to understand, what your mode of acquisition is, and to help you or the particular firm capitalize on what you're trying to do, getting the best systems and processes in place to attract those customers and making sure that you, for lack of a better term here, kind of hook them into your business. Not hook them in a negative way, but let them know that they've made the right choice. So was it happenstance that I got there from being a CPA? Some of it possibly, but once we started saying, hey, how can we help businesses affect the score instead of just keep score, was something that I became extremely passionate about and can get behind. And for me, it's just a lot more fun. I'm not being critical of other accountants in any way, shape, or form, but that's what worked for me personally, and that's how I got there.
It is amazing how much we don't know about running a business as lawyers. I mean, we don't get any training whatsoever in law school, and for me, it was more a matter of realizing the way that the firm I first went to work for was dysfunctional, and having to work through all those dysfunctions, and was working for years by trial and error and trying to read and self-teach until I finally got with you guys, and it's been a great help. What are some of the big issues you see, repeatedly in plaintiffs' firms as far as that are holding them back as a business?
I think you touched on one of them in just what you said. It's a lack of training in how to run a business. You guys, attorneys, are trained to practice law. You're not trained to run a business that practices law. So what are the industry best practices, and what areas should you concentrate in? And again, keeping up with my little bit of an analogy with the automobile repair shop, it's the same thing. They know how, generally someone knows how to repair vehicles very well, so he's working for someone, so he decides he's going to go open a business that that repairs vehicles without realizing that there's much more to it than that. Hey, all of a sudden, we've got to have a receptionist. We've got to make payroll. We've got to keep books and records. Those types of things generally don't come natural to business owners because they're trained to do what their business does, not how to run the business. So Vista plugs in and at that level to help them work on their business, if you will, and not in it. We don't come in and tell anyone how to practice law, make judgments in lawsuits and those type of things. But what we do is just kind of look at it from, I call it from soup to nuts, from the entire business pipeline of, why does your phone ring? And when it does ring, how do you answer it? How do you get the business into your pipeline? And what's the best way to move whatever product it is, in your case it's a lawsuit, through your particular pipeline and in the most efficient and effective way. And I will not, generally will not say one of those words, efficient or effective, singularly, because, just being fast for the sake of being fast is not it. Some cases obviously need to be worked up longer because they're more complicated, more complex, and we want to make sure that, or attempt to assure, there's no way to make about 1,000, but that we identify those cases that should be moved through more efficiently, but also have a system in place to identify the cases that need to be slowed down, worked up, and worked very effectively to get the actual result. So what are some of the things that lawyers don't do? Is a lot of times they, and again, this is a generalization, they say, hey, we need to move our cases quicker. And in a vacuum, that sounds great until we go through the conversation about, efficiency versus effectiveness. And a little bit of an aside is my analogy to that is if you're going to have brain surgery, do you want an efficient surgeon or do you want someone who's effective?
Exactly. And every case is different.
Absolutely.
If you only have 6 weeks of chiropractic treatment, that's a case that probably needs to get moved along pretty quickly, whereas if it's a serious case, it makes a lot of sense to fully investigate and take depositions and hire experts and push it to the courthouse. But
Absolutely.
One thing I will say is I've found in my last year, it happens all the time, but this last year we've had nothing good happens from delay to a plaintiff's lawsuit. And what I mean by that is in the last year, I've had clients get in a second wreck. I've had them pass away from unrelated causes. I've had them get arrested. I've had them get deported. Every possible bad thing that can happen, we see happen, so there is a definite advantage to moving things efficiently, to the extent possible.
I 100% agree. The longer a case hangs around, and we measure a lot of things, as you know, in Vista, we better be adding value to the case. And one of the things I really have enjoyed about working with plaintiff lawyers is that the lawyer and their client are on the exact same side of the table. And what I mean by that is the better the client does, the better the lawyer does, and vice versa. So absolutely, and educating or keeping your client informed of where their case is also extremely important in the practice of law. In that you want your client very involved in what you're doing, but you don't want them to be an impediment. And and what I mean by that is as long as the firm is proactive in keeping the client informed of what's going on, they're not calling you and taking up time saying, what's going on with my case? So good systems, good processes of client contact are extremely important.
And can you give an example of like how you set up and do a process? I'll give you, maybe you can use one from my firm. I think, a lot of our listeners are probably going to be people that do trial work. So I know in our firm, one of the challenges as the firm grows and we're getting more lawyers at the firm is making sure that, we request, notice, and take depositions of, let's say, truck drivers and trucking safety representatives.
Right, absolutely. I can give you an example using that. What we found is most law firms have some type of case management system, and I'm not going to name any names, but there's probably 100 different varieties out there. There's some that are more popular than others, and some that are, I would say, are maybe a little bit better than others, but they're case management systems, and they're usually very good at capturing data that's relevant on particular cases. What they are not good at, and I'll say maybe there's a little bit of an exception, some are better than others, they're not practice management systems. In other words, if you are able to enter, when the deposition should be taken or when the expert has to be noticed or one of those things in the case management system, you may get a flag on the particular case that, those dates pop up for your paralegals or legal assistants and they're unable to track it. But what you're unable to do with most case management systems is get a macro look at all the cases that have experts, all the due dates that are out there in one particular area without digging in very deeply into those management systems. And what Vista's been able to do is build a little program that's kind of a macro that lays on top of these case management systems that is able to pull out where you can get an overview of your entire practice on our terminology for it is dashboards. On the dashboards that you can see, hey, we've got this many clients in this type of treatment, we've got this many, here are the dates that are coming up, here's expert notice dates, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a matter of talking through with the attorneys, generally it's the owner or the manager, and working with case managers about how to get information into the case management systems so we can get them out in a very efficient way to show the managers of how to manage cases and being able to coach your people in by having really good data. One more little snippet about data that we think is very important, and it's something that we should all recognize is that in the academic world, we are always, or I'll say in most cases, given enough information through the system to be able to solve a problem. In the real world, and I'll say even more so in the practice of law, just getting the data is the hard part. Once we get the data, we can make very well-informed decisions. But if you can't efficiently and effectively get that data, sometimes we find ourselves guessing, not having good information, and we're pretty much sticklers to make sure that we gather that data and that we're confident in that data. So I hope that tells you a little bit about how we dig in and do some things at Vista.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, the dashboards have been a game changer for me. It used to be if I wanted to meet with a lawyer and find out how he or she was doing on cases, whether the lawyer's working them up the way I want them worked up, we would have to just go through and audit each file and make our own spreadsheets, and it would be really time-consuming. And now I can just press a button. I can see how many cases, for example, the answer's been on file for more than 90 days, but we haven't taken depositions yet. Or the lawsuit's been on file for more than 30 days, but the defendant hasn't been served yet. And, also when I'm getting ready for meetings, I can just pull up cases with, all cases with expert deadlines coming up in the next 60 days or 90 days,
right,
whatever the time frame. And it's so great.
As long as it's put into the case management system properly and consistently, which is a training process, then we can get it out and we can refine what it is that you need. And what you just went through, Michael, those things that you named off they're particular to your firm, but they may not be as relevant to all other firms. I mean, every dashboard that we've built, every firm that we go into has its own unique personalities and wants and needs, and we don't come in with a cookie cutter and say everything has to be just like this. We kind of take the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, and then evaluate what is needed and attempt to adapt what the individual firms are doing as minorly, if you will, as possible, but also in a way that you can get that effective, accurate data out of your system. So no, I appreciate that. I'm glad to hear that those dashboards are still good for you.
Absolutely. And what I like about, the first time I worked with the case management system, when we got our trainer down, I tried to explain to the trainer that I was a litigation firm. And she tried to explain to me, well, you're wrong. You need to be a pre-litigation firm, and these are the forms, and this is how you need to do it. And it didn't go over very well with me, and it's just also not what I'm great at. I mean, we all have our talents, and what I'm good at, and what I enjoy doing is working up the bigger cases. And
so we've adapted what we've done to help you do that.
Exactly. And so what you guys did is you took exactly, we drew out my systems that are my ideal systems, the systems I wanted to have followed, and then mapped them out and programmed them. And it was nice to have someone actually listen to me. That's an interesting point. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. One struggle I have when I'm trying to I found it takes me about a year to get a lawyer to buy in to these systems. Because they come in and they're like, no, I'm practicing law. I'm a lawyer. This isn't making hamburgers at McDonald's. I shouldn't have to follow these step-by-step instructions and enter all this data. And then a year later, when things aren't happening on their cases, and they finally realize, wait a minute, these systems are there for a reason, then I tend to get buy-in. But what do you say to people that say, well, hey, wait a minute, we're not making hamburgers at McDonald's. This is, there's supposed to be thought and choice and discretion in the practice of law.
I agree 100% that there is in the practice of law, but remember that very subtle difference that I talked about a minute ago. We're talking about the business of running a law firm versus the practice of law. You will never get. Never is a bad word. It's highly unlikely you get anyone on the Vista team to say we know a lot about practicing law. And I do agree that you're not making hamburgers at McDonald's. Every case is different. Every set of facts is different. But that doesn't mean that cases should not go through, from an administrative and functional standpoint, a process. Lots of cars that roll off assembly lines are very different. They're different in color, they're different in the features and things like that, but it's on the same assembly line. It goes through, and that's where the efficiencies come into play. And I do agree with you that sometimes we get pushback that says, we're not, this is not cookie cutter. So what our discussion becomes is, just like I said earlier, that we're not trying to change the way you practice law. We're trying to make sure that all the systems and the best practices in getting cases through as efficiently and effectively are followed, and to have a management system that can allow us to check up on that. And the only way to make that happen is to utilize some type of system to pull that out. And if a firm, your firm is not what we would consider a high volume firm, but it really doesn't matter because you still have more than two cases. And if you have more than two cases, you get into wanting to know that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed on all of those cases, even though the case facts are very different, and they vary from case to case. But you know that you're going to have to open a file. You know that you're going to have to request medical records. You know that X, Y, Z, whatever those things are that are repetitive, we want to make sure that they're done, again, very efficiently. And one other thing, a lot of times if we're able to talk to the attorneys, and as the, in some cases non-attorney, manager type people, we're able to communicate that sometimes a little more effectively. That's why we like to talk to people, directly. So I don't know if I kind of got to your questions. How do we get to their buy-in?
You did.
It's education.
And it's interesting because I've got a little take on it, because when someone comes to work for me, I often am trying to change the way they practice law because I want them to do it my way. Because when people refer us a case, we're making a certain promise as to what we're going to do, and I need to make sure it gets done. And the tools that we use with you guys is ways to make sure that the things I want done, from the request for information and obtaining data, and sometimes getting a restraining order, the day the case comes in, through getting records, communicating with our clients, monitoring the file, all that stuff is getting done the way we want it done. And so, you guys didn't tell me how to practice law, but you've really helped me implement and make sure other people that work for me are practicing the way I want.
Absolutely, and I think you're not saying that you practice law by checklist. There's so many judgment things that come into that, but you still have to ask, certain questions. There still needs to be a certain amount of contact, and how the attorneys worked within that system is very important. When the Green Bay Packers designed their famous sweep, it was supposed to go one way, and everybody had their jobs to do. But if something didn't work exactly right, that running back had total flexibility to use his talent and judgment to do what he thought's best. We're just trying to, line up the play. We're not going to say that it's going to work perfectly every time, but without lining it up, it's chaos. And,
the other thing,
that's what we try to prevent.
The other thing I found is when the systems are working, when, a lawyer doesn't have to think, okay, what letters do I need to send out? What do I need to do to get depositions noticed? Have we served that person or not? When those things are happening automatically, then the lawyer is freed to actually work on the big strategic things. Okay, so we're able to do more focus groups. We're able to put a lot more thought into depositions, create exhibits in advance, because we have time now to actually think about our cases, because we're not, stuck panicking all the time or worried about a deadline coming up that snuck up on us, or it really, and that's what it takes. It takes about a year. It takes someone to not follow the system, see what goes wrong, and realize, okay, these systems actually help me and free me up to be a better lawyer.
And that's our goal. That's our goal, is to help you practice law efficiently and effectively, and not worry about, turning the lights on, or whatever the things are that take up your time and keep you up at night. And what we found, what generally happens, is that the things that keep attorneys up at night is not actually the practice of law. It's the business of running the law firm, and that's where we plug in.
And things falling through the cracks, and that's one thing that it's helped with. I had a lot of pushback when, we used to have meetings with me or with a managing attorney every month, and we went to having a lawyer in the legal system do a file review. That they had to document in the file once a month, and then like a mini meeting with me where I don't go over every file, but I look for their file reviews and their cases, and we do like a 2-hour meeting instead of a 2-day meeting.
Right.
And I had lawyers push back saying, well, I don't have time to do this file review on my files every month. And I'm like, well, if you don't have time to touch the file in a month, then you don't have time to work on the file. If you want to make money off this file, you need to at least have time to look at it and work on it. If you don't, well, then, you have too much work, or you're not working hard enough.
I totally agree. And that brings me to, the 3 points we always talk about in regard to people, because sometimes when we go into law firms, we hear from the owner, my people don't do this or they won't do that, that kind of thing. And that's, a lot of times I consider it a little bit of a cop-out, because in my opinion, if you're the owner or the manager, you're responsible to your team for 3 things, which is to make sure that they have the tools to do their job, to make sure they have the training to do their job, and to make sure that you have explained what the expectations are of that job, and those expectations obviously need to be realistic. But if you've done those 3 things, given them the tools and the training, or assured they have the training, and explain what you truly expect, and then the team member cannot or will not perform, that's the only time, in my opinion, we should look at actual people and possibly making some type of change. Because if we haven't done those 3 things, that's really a management problem. It's not a people problem. We've got to get that right, and then we're able to say, okay, we've given you the tools, you have the training, you know what we expect, and here's our time frame. We're going to revisit this, and if it's not getting done, then we have to reevaluate. That's pretty strengthening, really, and assuring, because some of the things that no one likes to make a personnel change, and what we found is because of the person, because a lot of times they're really unsure if they're making the right decision. But once you go through the process of assuring yourself and being confident that you've given them tools, training, and you've explained it, and there's then the performance in there, it becomes so much more easy and logical because you can actually look that employee or team member in the eye and say, look, what would you do if you were me? You have all of this and you've just chosen not to perform or for whatever reason you can't, but it's the same result. And it gives the owners much more confidence in running their practice and when they're assured that those things are happening.
Yeah, I remember the paper tool y'all gave me to do that was I think you call it a performance improvement plan. I had to meet with an employee, and as funny as this is, as a trial lawyer, which you would think is a confrontational business, and I have no problem being confrontational in court, in social situations, I don't like confronting people and confronting problems.
Right.
And so I avoided it, which makes problems bigger. And so, I came back from a Vista workshop I went to a few months ago, and we had one particular employee that we're having some issues with, and so I wrote up a performance improvement plan. I met with him, and I was just shocked at how positively he responded. In fact, within hours, I got emails. Well, here's some things I've been working on that I've been thinking about doing, but I didn't know whether I could say anything or not. Here's some ideas, and it just 180-degree change overnight. Once I think he was going around just thinking he was going to get fired because he was messing up, and when we come up with a plan and training and help, and it just really made a huge difference. And he just lit up and responded so positively.
I'm tickled to death to hear that, Michael. And again, if employers get two of the three, they usually go for the tools and training, but they forget the expectations part, and that is so important because the team member, the employee, they can't read our minds. And a lot of times, if owners and managers that have reached some level of success, you're usually intrinsically motivated. And sometimes our team is just not that way. And we need to not want people to be exactly like us, but we have to build systems and processes to assure that you get the outcomes that you want. And that's part of being a good manager. It has nothing to do with practicing law, but it has to do with being a good manager.
But I will tell you, when my other departments are working right, when I don't have to worry about losing a call with the receptionist, I don't have to worry about things being filed at the wrong place or not being routed or hearings not being calendared properly. It sure makes it a lot easier to concentrate on practicing law.
Amen. That's our goal, is to free you up to do what you do and to do the right thing for the client. That still has to be utmost in our minds and in our clients' minds, and I know it's that in yours because we've had those conversations.
Yeah. One struggle that I've had, and I know talking to other lawyers they've had, is hiring. What is some advice you can give to lawyers on finding and hiring the right people? Because I noticed that, and I've actually read some studies on this recently, or articles at least on this recently in my own experience, is that the interviews do not seem to be a very good way to predict who's going to do the job. They just seem to measure how well people interview, and it seems like the people that hop around from job to job interview best because they have a lot of practice at it. And then resumes. I mean, there's so much puffery going on in resumes. I mean, I have people calling me. I just had one yesterday. A friend of mine has someone applying, and our former file clerk who worked for us for a year said she was a litigation paralegal for 6 years at her firm.
Wow. Wow. No, I can certainly address this. Certainly can address this. We go by the old adage of hire slow and fire fast. And what we mean by that is hiring, it is much more of an art than a science, but there are some things that you can do to increase the batting average, if you will, of making the right hire. And generally, it's a process. What we hate to see is or hear is that someone needs to make a hire by Friday, whenever Friday is, because a lot of times we're looking for a warm body as opposed to the right person. And we are strong believers in hiring slow, going through an interview process that's a little bit more involved than the average bear, if you will, the average interview. where we're very intentional about what type of ad, if we're going to use, a public ad. We want to the ads that we use are generally longer than the normal ad. In most cases, I do not like using a blind ad. I don't need to tell people where they're interviewing, simply because they're going to find out sooner or later, I hope. So why do we want to hide some of that? Now, there's some specific reasons sometimes why you want to do that, but in most cases, I fall on the side of putting the name of the firm in there, being very descriptive as to what you're looking for, and then asking for three things in a response. We want to get your resume, which is generally, accepted. I want to know what your salary requirements are, and I want you to have a short paragraph or paragraphs that tell me why you fit the job. And that screens out a lot of people. What I'm more interested in than some of the content in that is that the candidate is able to follow instructions. And if they're able to string a few sentences together in a paragraph, that's good. You learn a lot there. And you don't just get a stack of resumes for someone to pour through. You've kind of pre-screened, if you will. And if you're interviewing for a $30,000 position and the candidate says, I need 130, then no matter how good they are, that's probably not going to work out. And again, I don't want to say that we haven't interviewed people who's plus or minus 10 or 15% on either side of what we think the position is worth, but if we want to know what the market is, and that's a way to figure out, or at least get some read on what the market is for the position that you're offering, is what do people tell you their salary requirements? And we also know that some people puff that. But again, that's the start of the process. Then we believe the next step is a telephone interview. How do they work on the phone? What we're trying to do is not waste a lot of time to get people in the office for an interview without having an idea that these could be the right people, and that the salary that we're willing to pay is in the ballpark of what they are asking. So it's a very intentional process to go through that. We're also strong believers in shadowing, if at all possible, before you make the hire. See if you can get the person to come in, if you've gone through those processes, to spend half a day or a day in your office. Let your team get a read on the candidate and give you input, out of your presence, because obviously a candidate, as you said, they're good interviewers. They're going to put on the interview is the best foot forward. So again, I'm probably going on a little more than you wanted in this, but we're very much strong believers in that, and in taking your time, being intentional about the hire. And I'll take this one step further that you didn't ask about, which is part of this, in my opinion, is the actual onboarding process. Once you pull the trigger and you get them in, what's their first day look like? What's their first week look like? What's their first month look like? We want to set them up for success instead of just saying sink or swim. And those days, weeks, and the first month should be pretty much choreographed. And again, we're trying to get the best read that we can, but also we're trying to set them up with everything that you expect and communicate that. So again, probably a little bit more than you wanted there, but that's how we like to see it done, and that increases the batting average.
Yeah, the other things I would mention is, definitely check references. That's the thing we rush through. And I remember I have a former manager that hired someone, and she didn't tell me, she hired the person as a paralegal and didn't tell me until afterwards, and she had actually worked for one of my referring lawyers. I actually knew her, and I had a bad feeling about it, but we had already hired her. It was one of these, we needed somebody Friday situations, unfortunately. And, I mentioned it to my referring lawyer, we hired so-and-so, and he's like, oh my gosh, why didn't you call me? She was a disaster. And yeah, that's right. And just, and it was just so frustrating because the manager had just, this is a very, very, very good friend of mine. I mean, one text or one phone call, it would have taken 30 seconds. And I have found that while I have my manager do a lot of the hiring process, because I don't have time to do everything, and she's better at it than I am, the one exception is checking references. because a lawyer will take my call and actually speak to me honestly, whereas if it's a manager, they just either won't take the call, or they'll just confirm dates of employment, where lawyer to lawyer, I find that people are a little more forthcoming. I know some states people have to worry about references, but Texas actually has a statute giving you immunity for job references.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. And I do agree with that, even though I didn't say that through my response. I agree in checking references. The other thing that I think everyone should consider is some type of aptitude test. There's some good ones out there. Again, I'm not going to name names, but there's 2 or 3 that we like to use it's not really what I would call a personality test, but it's some aptitude that this particular person fits the job that you are actually looking for them to fill. Their aptitude is leaning that way. Again, we believe that it's impossible to measure the cost of a bad hire, so we would rather spend a little bit more and have a little bit more cost on raising our batting average and getting the right hire. So
I'm 100% with you on that. Other things we've done is we've developed actually, short subject matter tests of stuff where someone really has experience as a paralegal in Texas. They know some basics. We don't expect them to have everything memorized, but if we put them there with a rule book, they should know how many days you have to respond to discovery. They should know what we call a Rule 11 agreement, which is an agreement to extend a deadline typically, what the rules are for filing medical records. That's just some basic knowledge. And we've got some people puffing their resumes when they weren't able to do that. And finally, recently, we've started doing criminal background checks, and we have had a number of people, including one we almost started for counting, with theft convictions.
Ouch.
And then someone else with, multiple assault convictions and stuff. And, they interviewed well. They had an okay job history, but it's just, we just can't take that risk.
I don't think we can do enough, Michael, in looking at backgrounds. We also suggest stalking them on Facebook, social media. What do they have out there? It's amazing what we have found, both good and bad. There's lots of ways to do it. There's lots of techniques, and in this particular area, I don't think you can use too many techniques to raise the batting average on this, because once again, you can't measure the cost of the bad hire. It's just it's tough. It's tough. Turnover is it can rob profits quicker than anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, it sets you back so much to have to, hire and train and somebody else, and then all the work that doesn't get done while the other person's out, and then while the bad person's not working, then when they're out, then when you're having to get someone else up to speed, you get a huge lag time.
Exactly.
In fact, I found that it helps to pay a little more to get good people than it does to try to be cheap and get bad people and have to constantly replace them.
I agree with that too, and the thing that we can find through a detailed interview process is what motivates people. A lot of times we find it's not money; they're looking for job satisfaction, and certainly money is a part of it. Don't get me wrong on that; it has to be reasonable. But pleasant place to work. If everyone in your office told the candidate, it is a great place to work. It's respectful. It's somewhat fun. We get our work done. We work hard. We play hard. When a candidate hears those things, they want to come, and that's what you want, is to be a magnet as opposed to just out there hunting. I call it fishing rather than hunting. We want to fish and attract someone to us rather than go hunt them down.
Exactly. So when you have a law firm, reach out to you, say, hey, I'd like you to look at my business and see where you could help. What is your process for kind of looking at a law firm coming in there?
I love it that you're asking a question that because you went through it.
Yeah, I know.
I know. What our process is, and there's no surprise, we do have a process. Is generally people reach out to us in different ways. Email, phone call, and just about all of it is word of mouth. Thank goodness. But we want to gather information from the firm, and then we do an office visit. We we have what we call our pre-visit package, which requests certain data. We want to know, if we can, learn a little bit about the culture that's currently at the firm. We do that through surveys and questionnaires of the team members. We generally spend 1 to 3 days on site, depending on the size of firms, et cetera, doing interviews, getting the vibe of the place, looking at what systems and processes are there, digging into case management systems. From there, we produce a report that says, hey, this is what's good, this is what's bad, this is what's ugly, this is where the action steps that need to be taken, in our opinion, from our assessment. And at that point, there's a roadmap for the firm to follow, and they can take that and run with it, or percentage-wise, probably 75 to 80% of the clients that we perform an assessment on, and that's a project for us. The assessment part that I just described then says, after the report is, hey, can you help us implement this? And we then say, yeah, we can do that, and here's how we do that. We have operational consultants that are point people, if you will, for clients, and we generally have on-site visits to coach, and we have monthly proactive phone calls where we decide what projects and what chronology. In other words, where can we get the most early yardage is where we want to start with the firm. And we have what we call our 24/7 reactive service, which is where if there's a question that's hot that, hey, we really need some input quickly, we welcome any phone call or email, and we'll respond as soon as possible, even though we may have a phone call, a proactive set call coming up in 2 days. So we try to deliver our services that way, and we have a very specific way that we monitor our progress on projects. We keep a top projects document, and we basically tick them off. How far are we? We have an internal meeting once a week. Hey, where are we on this client? What's the projects? Where are we? Is anybody stuck? Can we help? So again, no surprise here. We have a process, and we've been able to, lucky enough or skilled enough to be able to say that we've helped a lot of firms improve their outcomes. And sometimes they're looking for a improved process, smoother operations, which yield more profitability. Sometimes we've had people say, look, I think I'm doing okay, but I need a system that helps me get out of here. I don't need to be, doing everything. So we try to define what success is for the individual firm and the firm owner, and we simply map out, how to get them there and hold them proactively accountable to the best practices and any innovation that we know to help get them there. So that's the process.
Yeah.
It starts with assessment and then moves into implementation.
For me, success is doing all the things I enjoy doing while the things I don't enjoy doing are done well by someone else.
Amen. So, I think I remember that.
I'm about 75% of the way there. We're working on it. One thing that I've struggled with over the years, because, I started off, I've worked with other consultants. I've, started off by buying the E-Myth book, by doing reading other business books, is I'll go by and I'll look at my business, and I'll spend a day or two, quote unquote, working on the business, and I'll come up with a list of 100 things I want to get done. But when I try to do 100 things once, nothing gets done. So how do you go about actually prioritizing it, making sure that, things actually happen?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, we always look at, what items, what things can we do that's going to get us the quickest response, the quickest improvement, and will also allow for buy-in from your team. We've gone into firms where they've tried lots of change, lots of projects, attempted to change things, and they don't stick with it. And therefore, when it doesn't get, when the team can't see any progress, the whole project will fail, or it'll just slow down and go away. We generally don't let those kind of things happen. It's a constant pressure, if you will, to say, okay, here are the projects that are on our board. We've thought through, and these are the top 5. We're going to work on these top 5 until we get them done. And once the team realizes that we're not going to let go until we get to the end, we're going to wrestle that alligator until we ultimately win. That's where buy-in comes from. It's just being consistent and identifying the projects, prioritizing them, and quite honestly, a lot of times the team members help us do that because they know what needs to be done. Sometimes, you may not want to hear it, but sometimes they know more than you in where they really need help. So,
I will say that I did find at the beginning we got a lot of. Michael's come up with a bunch of ideas and, not follow through. So if we ignore him this time, it'll pass. And we had to get through that resistance.
No, and you're right. Right.
That you guys have done is you've had us work on, I guess, certain project cycles where, during the next 8 weeks, we're going to work on these 2 things or these 3 things.
Right.
And then you've had me put everything else in a parking lot. So when I come up with my list of 100 great ideas, just put them all in the parking lot, and then when we finish our current projects, we look and see, okay, now do we actually want to do any of these?
You're right. You can have
too
many. You can have too many. The other thing is that we've learned is there needs to be a point person, someone that owns the project. If you say that, hey, everybody's responsible for something, generally it doesn't happen. If you give one person the responsibility and they're the go-to person, then again, it doesn't always happen, but most of the time things get done. I call that my public restroom theory, which is,
right.
Public restrooms are probably the most nasty places in the world because we're all expected to keep them clean. There's no one particular person that does that. If there was, it would be clean because that one person would do it. But when you say everybody, it's your job, then it's always the next guy. And we're pretty adamant about having a champion or an owner of a project.
The other thing I found is it can't be me because if I'm between working on a project with accounting or a paralegal and getting ready for my trial, I'm doing trial work. And it's what I like, and it's got the, you feel the urgency, and although there's always urgency, there's an interesting book I listened to recently. I've been doing these books on tape when I run, and it's called The War of Art. It's about a writer and his struggles to write and overcome writer's block, and he says that, if you want to write or you want to do art, and I think the same holds true to, I think, improving a law firm. You have to separate out what's important from what's urgent. And there's always something urgent, and you deal with the urgent after you do the important stuff because there'll always be an urgent thing to distract you. And you just have to sometimes, okay, this is urgent, and I'll get to it in 3 hours, but I still need to do the important thing that I had set out that I'm going to do today. Because if not, the little mini crises keep you from getting anything done. Well, I'm just quoting somebody. So.
Well, yeah, and I've never had original thought. A lot of things that you've heard me talk about today, I've learned from reading, from getting involved in firms. The other thing that I'll say before we get off is that we learn with every firm because we don't go in there saying that we have a cookie cutter approach. We want to say what's working well for you. And a lot of times we'll say, gosh, we've never seen it exactly like that, but that's really cool. And we do a lot of R&D at Vista, which is rip off and duplicate. If it works, we want to see everybody do it, our clients for sure.
One of the good things about plaintiff lawyers is we are pretty good about sharing what works because there is really plenty of work out there for all of us. I guess one big important thing, you've done a whole lot for me. I mean, I'm making more money and I'm sleeping more and actually have more free time than I did when we started working because things are just working better at my firm. If someone else wanted to get in touch with Vista or learn more about Vista, how would they find you and how would they do that? Pretty easy, really. I guess the easiest website is www.vistact.com. That's VistaConsultingTeam.com. That's what CT stands for, so VistaCT.com. My phone number is area code 225-383-2974, or you can shoot me an email at tmckey@vistact.com, and we will respond. Or call Michael Cowen, and he'll give you my number again. Yeah, I will. Thanks, Tim, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, and I hope our listeners learn something they can use in their practices.
Well, I certainly hope so, too. It's something I enjoy doing, and I hope my passion for helping lawyers achieve their goals came through. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for tuning in today to Trial Lawyer Nation. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Tim McKey. Tim's really helped my firm from an operations standpoint. When I first started my law practice, I learned everything through trial and error. I worked for a guy that was an incredible trial lawyer, but not such a great businessman, and it took me really 20 years to learn how to run a law firm that functions right. Hopefully you can help skip past some of the hard lessons I've learned and get your practice running to have the firm that you deserve. Our next guest, I'm very excited, is Randi Mcginn. She is an incredible trial lawyer from Albuquerque, New Mexico. She has had some incredible verdicts. She's a fabulous speaker. She wrote a book, Changing Laws, Saving Lives, How to Take on Corporate Giants and Win. It's a book that I actually started reading, and I finished it in a day and was so excited I immediately handed it to one of my partners and said, read this and pass along. Everyone in the firm has to read this book because it is not only a great book on how to be a better lawyer, but it's also a great story, and it's just compelling, and she's a compelling conversation that you're going to want to hear. Look forward to talking to you next time on Trial Lawyer Nation.
We look forward to talking with you again soon as we continue to explore powerful insights from our amazing hosts and remarkable guests here on Trial Lawyer Nation. Until then, please be sure to subscribe and review this podcast on iTunes or your favorite listening app so we can continue to reach more listeners. Visit us at www.triallawyernation.com to send us a message, listen to previous podcasts, or learn more about Michael Cowen and our guests. This podcast has been hosted by Michael Cowen and is not intended to, nor does it create the attorney-client privilege between our hosts, guests, or contributors and any listener for any reason. Content from the podcast is not to be interpreted as legal advice. All thoughts and opinions expressed herein are only those from which they came.